everyone, and welcome to Tea from the Tower, How to Apply to Competitive Fellowships. My name is Daphne Penn. I am the founder of the Ebony Tower. I'm a recent PhD graduate from Harvard University, a former Ford Foundation Predoctoral Fellow, and the co-organizer of this workshop. The purpose of this panel discussion is to answer some of your frequently asked broad questions about predoctoral, dissertation, and postdoctoral fellowships. After the panel, there will be breakout sessions where you can ask more detailed questions about a particular fellowship with someone in a discipline similar to you. Now, to my left is...
Hello, everyone. My name is Sa-kiera Hudson, but please call me Kira. I am also a recent PhD graduate in social psychology from Harvard. And when I was in my first year, I won the NSF. And so on our panel, today we'll discuss the predoctoral fellowship, which is going to support you through graduate school. But there are also other types of fellowships. You have dissertation fellowships that will help you fund your dissertation research to get you out of grad school. And then you have postdoctoral fellowships, which are all about funding your research after you already have your doctorate. And so just to give a little bit of background on the history of the event, so Daphne and I were in the same cohort at Harvard, and we were part of several organizations where we would talk to people who really wanted to get more information on fellowships and how to apply. But the current structures at Harvard were not necessarily always conducive to the kinds of questions and information that we needed. And so we got together and we did what was called Harvard Hacks, how to hack your way in the system. And it's probably been one of the more successful things that we did at Harvard together. And so now we're both graduated, we're in a pandemic. And so thinking of, it's still fellowships time, and there's still people that need resources. And we wanted to use this time actually to maybe broaden our impact and make this a wider event beyond the walls of Harvard.
Agreed. And when we were expanding this, I was like, Kira, I hope we can get 50 people. And we ended up getting nearly 400 people registered, which is absolutely amazing. It demonstrates the need for this. But we were actually able to not only register a webinar with nearly 400 people, because it is not free on Zoom, but we were able to do that as well as compensate our panelists for their time through the support of some sponsors. So I just want to flash that on the screen to kind of give a thank you to the people who have helped make this event possible. And in terms of making this event possible, it goes beyond just the monetary donations, because there is some time and talent that is also needed to pull off this type of event. And I'm going to try to stop screen sharing now so that you can see the talent that was needed to make this event possible, which includes our amazing panelists that we will begin introducing now. First up, we have Jasmine Kwasa, who is a PhD candidate in electrical and computing engineering and neuroscience at Carnegie Mellon University. Her research investigates how hearing and listening is influenced by higher order cognition using cutting edge, non-invasive neural technologies. Whoa, okay. She started her PhD in biomedical engineering at Boston University, but winning the Ford Fellowship and the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program allowed her to seamlessly transition to Carnegie Mellon when her lab moved unexpectedly. Jasmine is originally from the South Side of Chicago and enjoys teaching dance fitness classes for fun.
Yes. Okay, so next up we have Julissa Muñiz, who is currently a PhD candidate at Northwestern University. Her research on learning in carceral settings, specifically within a juvenile detention center, has been supported by various fellowships and grants, including the Paul and Daisy Soros Fellowship for New Americans, as well as the NAED/Spencer Dissertation Fellowship.
Yes. Next, we have Sandra Portocarrero, who is a PhD candidate in sociology at Columbia University. She examines diversity, equity, and inclusion management practices and organizations. Sandra's research has been funded also by the Soros Foundation, the National Science Foundation, and the Center for Organizational Innovation at Columbia University. I mean, we got some heavy hitters on this panel.
So next up, we have a doctor in the house. So Dr. Monet Roberts received her BS in Biomedical Engineering from Georgia Tech, where her interest in pursuing a PhD stemmed from working as an undergrad researcher in Dr. Manu Platt's lab. So Monet received her PhD in Biomedical Engineering at Cornell University, studying the role of cancer glycoclast, who child?
Microbes.
Shedding, yep. We are humanities, social sciences. We butchered all of that. Love us anyway. Okay. So as a postdoctoral research associate, she aims to understand the role of lymphatics in glioblastoma and other neuropathologies. Outside of the lab, Monet enjoys cooking, video chatting with her 12-year-old sister, playing with her Yoki BJ, playing video games, hanging out with her friends, and all things natural hair. She has much more of a social life than I do, and so I support it.
Yes. And last, but certainly not least, we have Diane Vaught, who is a PhD candidate in economics and public policy at the University of Michigan. And she's also currently a dissertation fellow at the FDIC. Before starting her PhD, she worked as a research assistant at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston and Columbia University. She received her undergraduate degree in economics and mathematics from College of Charleston, and she was also the recipient of the NSF Fellowship. So we have an amazing panel who will answer some of your frequently asked questions that you submitted through the registration form, and we'll also try to get to as many as we can in the chat box. But one of the biggest things is the breakout sessions is also your opportunity to ask some of those burning questions you have because they're here for you.
Yes. So many of you wanted to know what you could do to stand out in your application. That was definitely one of the more frequently asked questions. So therefore, what we wanted to do was to provide each of our panelists an opportunity to share what they did to stand out in their various fellowship applications. So what we're gonna ask our panelists to do is just to take a few minutes to offer a key piece of advice. And so panelists, can you again say your name and some of the fellowships that you won, just so that people can connect some of the advice.
We'll start with you, Monet. You're at the top of our screen.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Monet Roberts, and I am a recipient of the Ford Predoctoral Fellowship, as well as the NSF GRFP during my graduate career. One thing that I will say in terms of, I'm sure other panelists will also kind of build upon this as well, one thing to make your application stand out is to make sure, I always tell people when I review their statements, really control your narrative. Be vulnerable with the reviewers. Let them know that they are funding somebody who is committed not only to, the field or to your work, but also in sort of helping the broader community outside of that, both for Ford and NSF. I think that a lot of people that I reviewed have been sort of cagey with their response, and they'll give sort of this, kind of dull kind of story of who they are. And I always tell them, like, let them know who you are, let them know your identity, let them know your background, and then let them know how it interweaves into your motivation and what you do every day and why you get up every day and do whatever you do with your work and why it's important for you to spread that to the community. I think that's one piece of advice that I would give.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Diane.
Sorry, I was unmuting myself. I'm Diane, and I study economics, and I have the NSF GRF within the social sciences. And I would say my advice is actually pretty similar. The best advice I got when applying was that the NSF doesn't fund projects, they fund people. So one of the benefits of the NSF is it can follow you across different institutions. It can follow you across whatever project you're working on. So you really want to build a narrative of who you are as a person, and also show that you are the type of person who thinks about the broad implications of a specific project. So both telling your personal narrative and showing that you're sort of a person who can think critically about all the implications of whatever project you're proposing.
Okay, thank you. Julissa?
Hi, everybody. My name is Julissa Muñiz, and the 2 fellowships I've received thus far is the PD Soros Fellowship for New Americans, which is like I guess it could be a pre-doc, but I think it kind of covers the ranges, both pre-doc and dissertation. And then recently, I received the National Academy of Education and Spencer Dissertation Fellowship. That's a mouthful. I think building off of what the other 2 panelists have already said, I think what's really important is to highlight why, if it's not just a question around intellectual curiosity, like where does it stem from, right? Like what is fueling your work, whether it's an early life experience, whether it's a social identity you carry, whether it's something you learn from your previous work as a practitioner, educator. And I think utilizing one of your gifts, if you're a storyteller, infusing story into how you share your narrative. And I guess to offer like another piece of advice that goes with that, I think sometimes we're hesitant to, lay claim to what our work could do. But I think what they're also looking for in many ways is the fact that you trust the implications of your work, right? That you trust that there will be impact. And I think being bold enough to name that impact, right? Especially if you've already begun data analysis and you're already doing the work, like not being hesitant and using language like, I think it'll do this. No, like name it, like my work will do these things, because I think going based off what Diane said, right? They're looking for the person, they're looking for that commitment, and they're looking at the fact that this is just one of many projects, right? So as much as your project might be dope, like they want to look at the person. And so if you're even doper, they're going to trust the longevity of what you'll produce.
Mm-hmm. We'll get to, so there was an audience Q&A. We will get to that right after we let everyone else answer, because I think this is a really good follow-up question. So Jasmine, can we hear from you next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jasmine. I'm in engineering, and I have the NSF GRFP Fellowship and the Ford Foundation Fellowship Predoctoral. Sorry, brain fart. So, yeah, and I was also recently awarded another kind of more transition to postdoc grant. And I think across all grants, no matter what, there's usually like a personal essay side, previous research, and then there's the, personal side, and then the research side. And so I think for the personal side, the other panelists have hit the nail on the head exactly. Like, be bold, be courageous, own what you think the impact of your work will be. And there are a lot of times when you have to also prove how your outreach is also impactful. Certainly be bold about it, and don't use that weak language. So definitely what Julissa said, that was beautiful. And then on the research side, I think one thing we don't talk about a lot is feasibility. So the narrative of your research plan should just be, the reviewer should think, this person can actually do this work in the allotted time. And I'll just stop there.
Yeah. And
Last but not least.
Hi, I'm Sandra. I'm getting my PhD in sociology at Columbia University, and I have both the National Science Foundation GRFP and the PD Soros. I think writing within fellowships it's like learning a genre. It's a genre, right? So you have to really highlight how is it that you are the person that they have to fund because you are so committed to your work and you will finish your research project. For the Soros Fellowship, because I'm an immigrant and the PD Soros Fellowship is for New Americans and for children of immigrants, I highlighted how I make sense of my immigrant background with my work now and who I am as a researcher and as a person. And for the National Science Foundation, I make sure that every paragraph talk about, like every paragraph graph reflected that I have a lot of perseverance and that I will finish that project if they fund me. So, and that my project will have broader impact in society, right? And those are the two things that NSF is looking for: intellectual merit, but also broader impact. How is it that what you're going to do is going to have a positive change in society, and how does your research align with the organizational mission and vision, right? So what I highly recommend going to NSF's website and see what is it that they stand for, because when they are evaluating you, they will use templates. So I'll stop there because I know we have more questions, but yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Okay, before we continue, someone had there are a couple questions. They want to know if you can quickly share your pronouns. And I'll also call on a few of you who have held multiple predoctoral fellowships, and you can talk about like, how was it possible that you had both at the same time? So if we can just quickly, Monet, then Diane, Julissa, Jasmine, Sandra, share pronouns quickly. Oh, you're sharing them in the chat. Thank you. That also works. I'm she.
Her. Yes, same. She, her, hers.
So for those of you who have held multiple predoctoral fellowships, how is that possible? Monet? Okay. Oh, okay. Sandra, you can start. Yeah.
Okay. I had actually 3. I had an internal fellowship my first year. So I came in off of a diversity statement that I wrote. And so I got my first year covered, applied for NSF and forward, did not get NSF my first year. So this is when they were allowing you to do it undergrad, first year grad school, and then second year grad school, and they changed everything, right? And so I did it my first year, didn't get NSF, but I did get forward. And forward, I think, unless I'm wrong, y'all correct me, but you're supposed to have 2 years that you stay on forward, mandatory. And so you do that. So I did that, went to the conferences, most amazing conferences you'll ever go to. And then I then deferred, or not deferred, but I guess like went on reserve for forward. And I got, once I got NSF the following year, after like the 2 years were over. So you're not able to stack them. So it ain't like, you out here rolling in the dough and just being like, oh, I got like $60,000. Like I'm out here balling. No, they make you stack it. So you got to do like one for like a term or whatever. And then you have to choose when you want to kind of go back and forth or finish on another one or whatever. So I finished my career on the NSF GRFP up until it was used up. And so that's how you can have multiple fellowships, and you just have to be in coordination with your fellowship office. Make sure your advisors knowing what he or she or they are doing, because money is very important. That's how you eat, live, sleep, breathe, whatever. This is your livelihood. So stay on top of things and just do the requirements that you need to do to continue to get funded.
Jasmine, sorry. Okay.
Really quick, yes. So exactly what Monet said. I applied to both of mine and was awarded them in the same year, my first year. And you basically can accept both, or however many, and then you activate the funds staggered at different years. And so, yeah, as she said, just be very strategic and don't take no for an answer. Sometimes you have to fight for it, but it is possible.
So what I did was I strategically applied to Soros first to come in with, I mean, I assumed that I was going to win, because I always, like, every time I apply to something, I'm like, I'm going to win this, So I applied to Soros before applying to grad school so that I could negotiate offers when I got into grad school, and I did. Also, I teach a negotiation workship at Harvard, as Daphne knows. So I'm like always thinking, okay, how are we going to negotiate this? And then in my second year of grad school, I applied to NSF. And NSF gives you 5 years to spend those 3 years that they give you. So right now I used NSF 1 year before my dissertation year. And now I'm going to use NSF for years 6 and 7, which really helps me because I have a child, and COVID happened, so I really need to take care of her, but also want to make sure I graduate with good publications so that I can be competitive in the job market. So one thing I do want to tell you is that you should totally talk, as Monet said, with your fellowship officer, and with the financial aid office at your grad school, and definitely negotiate with them, because you can't assume that everyone wants the best for you, you know, and because there's a lot of bureaucracy in the universities. So you have to advocate for yourself and then maybe talk to your advisor, other faculty within your department to help you move packages around and do that and make sure that you don't lose. You know, and some universities like NYU, they allow you to keep external fellowships on top of the funding that they offer you. Most universities they don't. They give you a top off, but NYU does. I know. I had an offer from them too, but I chose Columbia for other reasons. So yeah, those are, yeah.
To extend that, at least this happened to me. I actually lost one of my guaranteed fellowship years that Harvard gave me because I got the NSF. There wasn't any wiggle room. That was just standard. And so if I wanted to be a little more strategic, I would have waited a year to apply to the NSF so that I could have gotten both of my package. Now, they've since changed that policy because I think they realized that's not there. But I think just to reiterate, every school is different. And so some of the advice that you are going to hear, you must verify this at your particular institution with your particular situation because, you know, we're all different. All situations are different. So this is general advice. Just take that, not necessarily with a grain of salt, but just know that.
Okay, so I just want to say I'm happy for the people that came after us, but I'm low-key a little salty because I had a whole year where I was missing funding because Harvard took that year from me. But anyways, I think this leads to like a good broad question that people had kind of about the differences between types of fellowships, because I've definitely heard the ability to kind of accept multiple pre-doctoral fellowships that you can kind of spread out, but I haven't heard the same thing about dissertation fellowships, which, as Kira said, pre-doctoral fellowships, they kind of support you throughout graduate school. The dissertation fellowship generally helps with your writing, and a lot of them have like stipulations that you would finish in a certain amount of time. So I just want to see if our panelists, especially those who have won dissertation fellowships or transition dissertation / postdocs, can talk a little bit about how, especially like their applications, timelines, how that looked a little different applying for like a pre-doctoral versus dissertation fellowship. And we can start with Julissa.
So I might need you to repeat the question because I think I understood what you were asking, but can you reword that one more time?
I guess just how was it different? Because I know, so like for instance, when I applied for the Ford pre-doctoral fellowship, yes, I had a project in mind and it was good enough to be funded. Did I do that project?
Yeah.
But dissertation, it was a little different. So if you can just talk about like the differences in like specificity and research proposal or timeline, etc.
I would say the biggest difference is probably the clarity that's needed for the dissertation fellowship. I think, you know, in the workbook that you had sent out of general advice, I think one of the things that I really emphasized that was critical, I think, when I was applying, not just to Spencer, but I also applied to a couple other dissertation fellowships, was particularly the section on analytic approach and preliminary findings. I think at that stage, right, it's not good enough to say like, I will utilize open and Axel coding, right? They want to know like, what does that already look like? Because at that point, right, you're asking for money to have space to write. So they want to know that you're even at the stage to which you can begin writing, which assumes that one, you have data already. So you need to very explicitly highlight like, what data do you already have? How much more data do you need to answer your questions? And then I think what was very critical in writing was actually giving examples of how, I'm a qualitative researcher, so like, how was I already utilizing certain codes? And how was I already beginning to understand, like how I was gonna answer particular questions? So I would say like when going through the research narrative, as it was called in the Spencer application, I would say the bulk of my time and energy went towards clarifying my analysis, and clarifying and giving examples of what were already some preliminary findings, which is very different from the pre-doc, right? I think for the pre-doc applications, they're more interested in like, what are the research questions you're thinking of, and like almost creating, like in many words, like a problem statement of why those questions are important to the work, or why those questions will help answer the problem that you're looking at. Whereas I would say the dissertation is a little beyond that, right? Like, yes, you obviously outline your theoretical framework, your methods, like, yeah, those are quick paragraphs. But I would say at least half of the application is very much, because they're trusting you, right? They're gonna give you $27,000 to write. So they wanna know you're even at that point. And they'll be able to tell, right, if you're BSing, right? If you're like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do, but you're not utilizing actual examples, I think that's a quick way to filter people out. And that was kind of the advice I kept getting over and over from folks who had received the Spencer Fellowship. It was like, no, Julissa, you gotta be clearer than this. Like, you gotta give an example of what you're actually referring to in this. So I would say that was one huge difference.
Jasmine?
Yeah, exactly what Julissa said. I have a transition award, which is basically a dissertation award and a postdoc award put into one. It's from the National Institutes of Health, and I'm happy to talk to anyone else who is interested in applying. But my tactic for the dissertations part of it was, in the pre-doc, I'm saying, here are my ideas, here's what I want to study. But in the dissertation one, it's more like, look, I'm a perfect candidate. I am so ready to defend. There's just this one thing that I need help with. Can you give me money to do it for 1 year, please? And so what you're doing is you're proving that you already have all the chops and you just need this money to get to that next step. And so there's a lot of ways to justify that, but like for me, my publication record might have been a little weaker than I think most people coming straight out of a PhD. So I made sure that my dissertation postdoc award essay was all about, I've done the presentations, I've done the research, here's my data, here's all the stuff I've done, I've presented it internationally. My papers are this close to coming out. Can you please give me money to push those out so I don't have to worry about where I'm gonna get my money from, so I don't have to TA, all that stuff. And oh, by the way, give me a postdoc as well. So it's about filling this one particular niche, because you don't want to come off as I'm a mess and I have nothing together. Please give me a year to magically make it happen. It's more like, I've got this. I just need your help for this one little thing. And because I'm so good already, it's not taking a huge risk by giving me money, because I've already done the majority of the work. I think it's a different mindset, and Julissa explained that perfectly well.
Mm-hmm. As a follow-up question, somebody asked, like, should we stick to what we have experience in, that we're, in terms of the pre-doctoral application, what we're interested in and hope to pursue? And I'll just quickly say, for me, I always give people advice to try, especially for the pre-doc application, which I feel like they are more supporting you. It's less about the specific project and more about who you are. Like, the project is important. It needs clarity. It needs to, you have to have research questions that clearly align with your mission. But I personally wrote the project that was easiest for me to explain. It wasn't the project that I was most passionate about, but it was the one that I could write with clarity in order to fun. It was in my research area, so it was what I was interested in, but I didn't actually pursue that project, and they never asked me about it again, if I'm being honest. With the pre-doc, that's different from the dissertation, but they never asked it again.
Well, one thing that seems to be sort of, we keep talking about writing, we keep talking about clarity, but it's like, clarity for whom? So who are the target audiences for these fellowship essays, right? Because what is clear to me if I'm a psychologist writing to another psychologist, things can be very clear between us that's completely opaque to someone, even just one step out of our discipline. So when you are writing your essays, who did you keep in mind as you were writing both like your research statement as well as your personal narrative? Maybe they were the same, maybe they were different. And I don't know if Diane or Sandra wants to take this question to start.
Yeah, so I was told when I was applying for the NSF that in all likelihood, the person reading your application would be sort of in your broad field. So I was applying for an economics fellowship. So generally I would be writing to other economists, but they could be other economists working in any part of economics. And there was some small chance it could be some social scientist who wasn't an economist. So generally I tried to keep my language to the level that, like, you know, a graduate educated economist or maybe other social scientists could understand, even if they didn't know the specifics of my specific subfield.
For the Soros, I mean, not academics will not necessarily read your essays. I remember when I went for the interview, I don't think there were any academics, or maybe one or two. So, you know, if you are applying for the Soros, keep that in mind. For the NSF, also like Diane shared, I also kept it very, you know, simple. And you know what, like I remember when I sent in my NSF and then I read, of course, after submitting, I read it like 5 times more. And I was like, oh my goodness, like my methods don't make any sense. And to be honest, they did not very well, but reviewers actually gave me that feedback and granted me the grant. And they were like, okay, this is impossible. You can't, in order for you to find this, you need to blah, 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 you know? But everything else was good. So, you know, don't go too crazy about that if you feel like you made a mistake or something. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just apply.
Monet?
Yeah, I'll also say for target audience, so I did it in engineering. We were told, so for NSF, we were told, and I have like a few people who are mentors who were reviewers for NSF who basically like shared with us in certain sessions that, like, you know, you have somebody in your field because you apply to that field. But as Diane and Sandra said, like they could be anybody across the spectrum of the field. So I'm in cancer research, but like somebody in neuroscience and neuroengineering can be, you know, focusing on my stuff and like reading that. And so with NSF, you just have to make sure that you're speaking to, like you're speaking in, you know, lay terms to an extent to, you know, show that, you know, like like for me, right, like the engineering, the science part of it, but that I'm talking to a lay audience, which is what we're all trained to do. And so for Ford specifically says like, don't use any jargon because anybody could be reviewing your essay. And I kind of want to speak, you know, I'm not trying to steal, you know, the thunder of the host, but one question that I saw in the Q&A was about like, you know, a person who seemed to be very accomplished, but then they only got honorable mention. And so the target audience are your reviewers. Remember, these people are looking at hundreds of applications, hundreds. So you want to make it easier for whatever target audience you're looking for to like find those critical key things that they can easily point to and look at stuff, because, you know, they can deem you on anything and then you don't get the fellowship because it's very competitive, right? And so sometimes you get the luck of the draw with reviewers. Sometimes it just happens where you are an outstanding candidate. I've seen outstanding statements over the years that I've been reviewing them for people, and like somebody doesn't get it. And I'm just like, what? Like, how did you not get it? Like, what do you mean? And like, we don't know that side of things because we've only received the fellowship. We don't have the secret sauce to some of these fellowships. So like for NSF, the rate of people that I've helped on that side have gotten it, but Ford is just kind of tricky because one thing that we all didn't mention with Ford is that this is a fellowship for marginalized folks. We've all been marginalized, you know what I'm saying? And so how do we stand out amongst each other? We all kind of have similar oppressive stories. And so it's something where like, we're gonna try to get y'all through with these breakout sessions, but like, just, you know, as Sandra was saying, like, don't beat yourself up about some of these things. Like, don't sit up here and you don't get the fellowship and you're just like, oh my God, like, I'm not worth anything or whatever. Like, you're worth something. Just remember that like, there's a competitive pool of people nationally and internationally. And like, sometimes it's just little things. And sometimes it could be the reviewer had a bad day, you know, or like they were in a session trying to like fight for you. And then one person just really was like, I can't give it to the student because X, Y, and Z. So like, just want to give that to people, you know, if you have a chance to reapply, like reapply.
Mm-hmm. I actually did not get the Ford predoctoral fellowship until my 4th try. So, and some people ask that like, oh, you know, do you have to apply multiple cycles before it? I know a lot of people, it just took some time. And part of that was the first time I didn't have any sample essays, which we will eventually share with you all. We're compiling them now. You know, other times it was just getting the advice, and that's part of the reason why we're here. But Monet, you did not steal my thunder, because we were actually going there, because a number of people have asked, like, I don't have research experience, or, you know, I went to this particular type of institute, which I would like to say, your institution is Hispanic Servant Institute, that is not a weakness, and if they view it as such, that is their own issue. So I do want to put that out there. That is their issue. But there are things that people feel about themselves that, like, I can't change this. I might not have research experience. I might not have publications. How do you craft your essay or your essays in a way that balance what you think reviewers might count against you? Monet.
So sorry. So Jazz and I were talking about this. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in our breakout session, but just to give people, you know, a little gem for those who aren't going to be in our breakout session. We were talking about how controlling your narrative, like being able to take those weaknesses and turn it into a positive. You know what I'm saying? Like if you have a low GPA, but you worked 3 jobs, you were sending money home to family, you were trying to get your life together, and your academics just suffered because of that, put that in there. Don't dwell on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't take up space on the other good things that are kind of, you can have like an all positive for, but turn into a positive. Control your narrative. Let it work for you, because you are committed and you want this fellowship and you want these people to fund you. So like, you know, I say, take it and just say, this is what happened. This is the situation, and like, make it work for you.
If I had to give a piece of advice to folks writing these essays, it would be, and it's going to sound kind of odd, is to perspective take. Because what you're really trying to do is to sell yourself, but you need to see how other people are going to see you, to see how well that selling works. And I think in this case about controlling your narrative is really important. Why do we care about GPA? What does GPA signal? And if you don't have a high GPA, well, there are other ways that you can signal that underlying thing, but you won't think about it that way if you're not trying to look at it from the point of view of your reviewers looking at your essay. So if you do have weaknesses in your, and I'm kind of putting weaknesses in quotes because also they are looking at you holistically. Yes, they might be looking at things that easily to ding you on, but as a whole, like they're looking at you as a whole. So I am putting weaknesses in quotes, but it's like, well, what does that thing signal? So you not having publications, maybe that means that you know, you don't have the chops to do the research. Okay, well, hype up some other stuff, or tell your letter writers, y'all need to do a little bit more work in this area because I think I'm a little weak here. So that's just one thing I want to point out.
Can we do this just quick question? A lot of people want to know about. So this is kind of like one of those lightning questions where everybody can just talk about like, about how long did you take to like craft some of your winning essays? Was it months? Was it weeks? Did you work over the summer? So we can quickly get that question answered that people want. And we'll start at the top of the screen, Monet.
Months. I started in the summer. I had meetings with my recommenders. I gave them Excel sheets, and I was like, sent them reminders every month up until months.
Diane.
Similar. I actually applied twice and got honorable mention the first time and then got it the second time. I applied with the same research proposal, but tweaked over the course of a full year, and really intensely worked on it for probably 3 months before applying.
Jasmine?
Okay.
Jasmine? Okay. I procrastinated on it, but I had been thinking about it for a year. I thought about applying to NSF as a senior in college, did not apply because I was like, I don't know anything. And then the next year I had been thinking about it. And in September, when I started a course that was related to the lab I eventually joined, I kind of was thinking in the back of my head of the research plan throughout that course, met with the course professor who became my PI, and then wrote it, to be honest, within a few weeks, maybe a weekend. But I had my like personal statements and stuff read by all my friends and family to really get my authentic voice, and that was a huge thing.
Okay. Julissa?
I'm also a procrastinator, to be honest. So I think at the time I was also working on my proposal. So I think because I was working on a document that was addressing the dissertation one, or the dissertation application, honestly, maybe 8 weeks or 6 weeks. So not too bad. And the PD Soros application, there's 2 essays, and one of the essays, if I'm being completely honest, I wrote probably a week ahead of time, just because similarly, I kind of doubted myself the first time around. So I started an application the year before, but couldn't bring myself to submit it. So I think I'd been thinking about it for an entire year. And then finally, when it came to it, I knew what story I wanted to tell.
Sandra?
I took about a semester to write my NSF. The Soros was faster because the Soros doesn't ask you for like a detailed plan of how you're gonna, conduct your research. I think the Soros took me about a month, but the NSF, it took me a whole semester because I entered grad school with a project to study mass incarceration and the effects in the Latino community. But then my father was in prison and then he was gonna be deported. And then I told my advisors, you know what, I can't study prisons because this is too close to my heart. My dad's in federal prison and I go visit him all the time. So I crafted a whole new project on diversity, equity, and inclusion management with one professor through an independent study. So in that independent study, every week I read stuff and we met. And then instead of writing memos, we will craft my application and craft a questionnaire, etc. So yeah, about a semester. So.
Oh, I will answer the question. So I feel like I probably started, like, if the application was due in December, it's something that I would probably start no later than September, because I generally, and this will go to the next question, I like to get my recommenders all the information and essays that they would potentially need to write the best possible recommendation. So for me, it is, if I can get them all of that stuff at least 6 weeks before the deadline, that means I've been working on it at least 6 weeks before then. So a good 3 months before the deadline, I personally.
For me, I made a mistake in that I applied to 3 fellowships that same year and I proposed 3 separate proposals. That was one of the dumbest things I ever did because it split my attention too much. It would have been much easier for me to take the application to the NSF and then take that, tweak it for the forward, take that, tweak it for the other fellowship that I applied to. But what that does also suggest is at least for me, my application to graduate school actually served as a template for my personal statement and my fellowships. So sometimes you might already have some of the materials that you need to work on your essays. And what you also heard from some of these stories is that they took other things in other areas. Maybe they were in a class thinking and that applied to them writing their particular fellowships. And so then I also took my winning NSF and then got an additional grant money to fund the actual research rather than to fund me. So some of the stuff I think is also all connected. And so the timelines might seem odd. It took me, I think, about a month to write my NSF, but that's also because I had some of the components from my IRBs that I wrote to order to do the project anyway. So a lot of the writing, I think you can recycle. And I think sometimes people don't know that.
Okay, this next question, because people have asked about recommenders, someone seemingly maybe got dinged because of what recommenders said. So I just, if we can get a couple people to talk about how do you get the best possible recommendation? And also if you are a first year student and you want to apply for Ford in the fall or the NSF, do you ask your new advisor for a recommendation? So we can do hands. I don't know if anybody in particular wants to discuss. Julissa?
So I know when I applied to Soros, I was in my second year, something like that. Anyways, I used a letter of recommendation from actually my college mentor and advisor. I also used one from a faculty member at Harvard, which was my master's, and then one from my PhD program. And part of the reason I still included the one from undergrad, one, I wasn't too far removed from undergrad, right? Like I was, I think, 2 years out of undergrad at the point that I applied. But that faculty member, my mentor, had known me over the course of like 4 years, right? Like he could speak to like my early development as like a researcher, right? Because he guided me on my honors thesis as an undergrad, as well as like the summer research program. He was my faculty member. And I know sometimes people dissuade you from using someone from undergrad, but if that person can speak to like the longevity of your work and like your commitment to a type of work, I think that that's really powerful, because sometimes you're at the PhD level, right? Like that faculty member has only known you for a year. So if you can find someone who's obviously a faculty member, but who can speak to multiple years, and that, at least in my case, my research was still kind of related in some ways, I chose to do one from undergrad, one from my master's, and then one from my PhD. Now, I know I've seen people ask whether they should do the maximum amount of letters. I know that for some fellowships, you can submit up to 5. I didn't do that. I submitted 3. I didn't feel like I needed 5 because I also trusted the quality of the letters that were coming in. And I felt like 5 might be overdoing it to some extent. And I trusted the quality of the 3 that I was receiving.
Oh, Sandra, you want to go?
Sure. Sorry, I turned off my video. I was having a bite to eat because I am breastfeeding my daughter still, and I get really hungry when I'm hungry. So I apologize to everyone, but I'm here. I'm not moving anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I did the same thing that Julissa did. So I had the most recommended, I think for Thesaurus is 5, right, Julissa? I think so, or 3. Oh, 3. So what well, for Soros, because I applied before grad school, I asked people at Berkeley, where I got my undergrad, but I asked a professor, and then I asked the director of research program, the Haas research program, and then I asked a lecturer. So I didn't think a lot about status. As long as I had one full professor, I thought more about who can tell my story and who knows me better. So I did that, and it worked out very well. And then for NSF, I asked 2 professors from Berkeley, and then I think NSF is what? Is it 5 also or no? I don't remember, but I think you can, yeah, up to 5, because I have 5 people. I asked 2 people from my undergrad and 3 people from grad school, so that they could tell, again, like this story that makes sense, right? So yeah, that has worked for me.
Anyone else? I will also say that in the resource guide that we're going to send to you, I have a special how to get good recommendation packet advice that you will get in that to, if you have to know how to sell yourself, if you want your recommenders to be able to sell you, you can't expect them to write a letter that you couldn't write for yourself. And that doesn't mean you're writing it for them, but I give each of my recommenders bullet points. You should be able to say this about me because I know our relationship together. These are examples you could draw on. I'm not saying you have to, but I'm not gonna make your job more difficult than it has to be. So you'll get that advice in a resource packet. But since we are winding down, I wanna try to get a couple more questions. Someone wants to know if it gets more, what the question moved. They wanna know if it becomes more difficult to be competitive for like the Ford or the NSF, like the longer you are in graduate school. Like, is it easier if you are a brand new graduate student? And I think one thing to maybe add here is, I guess, how will they look at your application differently if you are a more advanced graduate student? Diane?
So I was actually told when applying that it's the least competitive sort of when you're applying as an undergrad or before you've started grad school, and it sort of gets more difficult as you go on because the people you're being compared to is a different set of people. So if you have a lot of faith in your abilities as an undergrad compared to other undergrads, you might have a better shot at applying during that time. I'm not sure. I don't know quite how to judge between first and second year of grad school. My sense is you might get put in the same pool, but I'm not positive.
Did anybody else want to chime in on that one?
I think it's also about the various things that they check you on. So at least for me, when I applied for the 4, they did not like my scholarly output. And I bet that as you get further into your program, people's criteria of that particular dimension probably gets much more stringent. But also they expected me to have publications in my first year, and I was like, how's the way? I'm not out. So, you know, it's also who you get and their own interpretation sometimes of what an appropriate level of X, Y, and Z is for your stage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So because, so some of these questions is not that we are skipping them or they're not important, but if they were more specific to a particular fellowship or we thought they might be covered in the breakout session, we did kind of hold them to like do broader questions. I know one question, we might do a couple rapid fire questions and then do our closing question. But one, is it appropriate to ask other people to see their successful application materials? Monet?
I say yes. I share mine with people. Also too, for those who may be at Cornell or thinking about Cornell, you got accepted to Cornell, whatever, the grad school actually has a binder of successful applications. So they're kind of already available, but like still, I think people have asked me personally, even though going to the grad school, which, you know, I think is very respectful, but like, you know, some schools may already have a binder with successful applications, but I think definitely I ask people and then I just kind of continue to pass it on to other people because other people help me. So I personally think, yes, it's appropriate.
Julissa?
I think it's about the way you ask too. So I know when I've gotten cold emails from somebody that I don't know whatsoever, like they just found my email and they're like, hey, can I have your application material? I'm like, I don't know you. Like, can we have a conversation first? Because I know at least for me, like, at least for the Soros application, I was a bit more vulnerable, right? And so going back to kind of something Monet said earlier, right? Like controlling the narrative. I'm very purposeful about how I disseminate my narrative and who I put that in their hands, right? Like, so I think one, if you are going to reach out to somebody, maybe ask to have a conversation with them first and ask like, hey, would you be willing to hop on a quick call or a Zoom call? And, you know, I would love to ask you some questions. And then maybe in that interaction, ask for the material. However, my other piece of advice, and some folks might not agree with this, but I also think sometimes you need to give yourself the creative opportunity to write your essay without the influence of reading someone else's first, because it's incredibly hard. Sorry, I'm on a computer. I'm not on my computer and I don't know how to turn off the iMessage, so it just keeps going off. I'm really sorry. But I think sometimes when you read another person's narrative, it's really hard to not be influenced by how they told their story. So sometimes try and give yourself the opportunity to write it without the influence of another narrative, and then take that one and how can you boost yours? But you don't want to mimic someone else's storytelling, right? Because then that takes away your own creative powers.
Yeah. We have done some of the legwork with asking if people were willing to share. The thing is, some of these essays are deeply personal. They reflect people's research interests or project. And so I really love what Julissa had to say, because it's like, if someone doesn't know you, can I trust you with my story? Because it's more than just an essay. You're asking someone to share their story, their research. There are a number of people that have shared. We will share those with you. We can't control like who does it. So, you know, disciplines, backgrounds, we don't know that. But we'll try to get as many as we can. Before we close out so that you all can make it to your breakout sessions in time, just if you have 1 or 2 sentences, motivational advice, especially because we're in a tumultuous time, higher education is looking a little scary, you know, someone even talking about we're dealing with racism and xenophobia and all of these. How do you stay optimistic in all of that, especially as you are navigating racism? And it's hard to answer that in 2, but that's why I was like, hey, y'all, can you do this in 2 minutes ahead of time? I mean, 2 sentences ahead of time. We'll start with Monet and go around.
So I would say one, a quote from Audre Lorde says that, you know, like self-preservation is not self-indulgence. It's an act of political warfare. So like self-care, take care of yourself. Like if you need a day, I've had to tell my mentor, and she's very woke and an ally. And so I'm just like, yo, like, I just need some time and some space. And she gets it. And for those who don't get it, like, it's okay for you to take a self-care day and just say, hey, I just need to take a mental break day and get myself together. Another thing that kind of gets me through is my faith, just praying and just kind of finding my center. And also too, knowing that I'm rooted in a legacy where like we've been oppressed for so long, and we come from a long bloodline of strong individuals. They've made it through harder times than we have. And like right now, like I'm just calling on that strength of my ancestors, my current family members, and just checking in on folks, make sure everybody's okay, making sure I'm okay, and just knowing like we're gonna get through this together.
Okay. Because you always go last, we're gonna call on you, Sandra.
For me, I've been very angry about everything that's happening, about the hypocrisy of academia, and the reason why I volunteered to be in this panel and why I'm trying to do other type of service work is I want to see academia full of people of color, and if I have learned something, if I have learned how to like, you know, get resources or fellowships, I want other people of color to have those resources too. So for me, this is kind of, okay, this is how I channel my anger and my sadness and I'm also very tired, but you know, and it's nice to create this type of community too. I mean, now I know that I can reach out to Monet or to Jasmine. I mean, I hope you guys will answer my email, but you know, if I need any help or advice or just chit chat for 1 minute, you know. So yeah, find safe people to talk to about these things. That is important.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Yeah, I was in this session for the Neuroscience Scholars Program. It's another fellowship that I had anyway. And everyone was kind of talking about like insecurity and imposter syndrome, and we're all people of color in this neuroscience field, and like, I mean, I feel bad about applying to things that are only meant for people of color, and this insecurity. And there was like 30 of us crying together. And it really highlighted to me that applying to these programs is like kind of in its own way reparations. And you should not feel insecure about winning them or applying to them or asking for financial support or asking for recommendations or asking for all these things. It's going to help you get to where you want to be. And then it's going to reflect positively on everyone around you too, especially those recommenders, especially your department, especially wherever you come from. So if you feel insecure in any way, or if your imposter syndrome's coming out, like this is the time to shine and just put your faith into doing this, because it's something that you deserve. If you don't get it the first time, keep applying. Apply every year you're eligible.
Mm-hmm. Julissa, then Diane.
I guess I'll keep mine short. I would say, you know, believe in your work, you know, and if you've come this far and you trust, I think, the impact and the intention of your work, like lead with that, right? I think it's very easy to have your research get morphed into something it wasn't intended to because of advisors or faculty input, right? Everyone's gonna have an idea of what your project should look like. But if you, right, like if you trust the direction in which you want to take your work, and you trust the communities that you work with, and, you know, your intention in that work, lead with that, and don't move away from your own politics, right? Like, I at no point do I hide that I believe in prison abolition, yet I study the carceral state, right? And people have tried to dissuade me from writing my politics into my narratives, but that would be untrue to me, right? And fortunately, I've continued to win these fellowships, right? So there are those spaces to be true to your work. And if they ask you a very direct question, as they did during the Soros interview, they asked me, they're like, Julissa, say there's Angela Davis on one end and there's Michelle Alexander on the other end. They're like, who do you align yourself with? So essentially they were asking me, are you an abolitionist or are you a reformist? I'm like, well, damn, this question's gonna make or break me right now. But I was like, Angela Davis, 100%, you know, and I think lead with that, you know, and so don't try and hide who you are for nobody, because if the space wants you, they'll have you, you know, they'll welcome you into the space.
Mm-hmm. And Diane, close us out.
So I think my advice is more broadly for academia and grad school, not just for applying for these fellowships, but if you're at the point where you're applying and thinking about what program you're going to, keep in mind the experience you'll have there and not just the pure ranking of the program. Obviously, you want to go to a really prestigious, high-ranked program, but you do not have to choose the highest ranked program if you visit there and they seem really horrible. You do not want to sign up for 5, 6, 7 years of misery. And then once you're already in grad school, protect your circle, and if you don't have to associate with people who make you feel bad. Grad school makes you believe that you do not. So guard that. You don't have to keep those people close to you.
We would like to thank our panelists for sharing their selves. Many of them offered advice in a written document that we will be sharing. Yes, this is recorded. People have been emailing me and typing like, I missed something. Yes, you will get the recording. It will be posted. I do want to get you to your breakout session, because in addition to our panelists who are hosting breakout sessions, there are other people who have also volunteered to host breakout sessions. So we don't want them to be like, when are the people coming? So thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the sponsors. Thank you to Mike.
Can we do a round of applause for Daphne? Daphne was the primary force of all of this. This is her brainchild. I'm so proud of you, and she did that.
We've been doing this together for years, so don't believe the hype. Okay, but thank you all, and look forward to these breakout sessions. So bye.